Hi, I'm Mike Hayes, media marketing serial entrepreneur and longtime shark whisperer. Now, this is Press Talk Media, helping grow USA one small business at a time. Today, we are all in the on-demand gig economy. So I also run the Yes Academy of client acquisition strategies for a big reason I'm going to tell you about. I am here for small business owners and entrepreneurs. So if you are feeling stuck or struggling for new customers, my amazing guest today will give you new hope, a fresh start, and I'm here to share new media specialty. Now, thanks to the topic at hand, you can now shorten your runway for almost any project to launch from idea or your vision if you're just going to the next level to reality. You'll know current vital resources and you'll learn how they'll lower your cost and save you time at the same time. You'll gain clarity on your one-page message, your signature story. You'll know your ideal customer, who they are and where they are. You'll know how to share your signature business story with them to help you sell more even before you meet them. All this can be accomplished in 4 weeks or less, and this can be done one step at a time. So if you need help after this interview, I'm founder of 1, Press Talk Media, 2, Helping Grow USA Media, and 3, the Yes Academy of Client Acquisition Strategies. Next up, you'll want to learn how your competitors are acquiring new clients today. You'll learn ongoing shifts. You'll learn about their strategies, and you'll learn about our attitude of saving you up to 90% of your time and 90% off agency marketing pricing. How can you possibly compete without knowing how your competitors are accomplishing such big discounts, as much as 90% off their marketing? Are you getting that? We understand that the small business market has broken down. We solve that. I have media marketing insider information that most people or agencies don't know about. That's why city leaders and chambers of commerce alike are asking us to teach the needed strategies to their precious small business owners to thrive today in the rising freelance gig economy. So we have our vlog, you're watching it, our national radio shows, our publishing company, and our Media Marketing Academy. Now, let's get to today's most exciting show segment, our guest interview. Folks, everything I know about small business and marketing, I've learned from my amazing media mentors and the celebrity interviews that I've done. Some of whom you may know and love, others you may not care for, but they all reached their pinnacle. They included Oprah Winfrey, Donald Trump, Tony Robbins, Steve from Apple, Wozniak, not Jobs, Geraldo Rivera, Joy Mangano, and many, many more. I learned the art of the interview as a documentary producer for NBC TV and radio in New York City. So when I tell you this, of all the interviews that I've done over the years, as I've mentioned, the ones I just told you about, I believe that today's is by far the most important interview to share with entrepreneurs ever. And that is saying something. So my guest now is Diane Mulcahy. Diane is currently a successful author, an adjunct lecturer at Babson College, and a senior fellow at the Kauffman Foundation, the respected Kauffman Foundation for Entrepreneurs. Her work has been featured in Forbes, in Fortune, Harvard Business Review, The Pinnacle, The New York Times, The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal, and numerous industry publications. So, if I promise you right now that she will open your eyes today to a whole new world of small business possibilities that you have not experienced before because they haven't existed before, will you spare a few more minutes with us and transform your life? I caution you, honestly, if you don't learn this, you will be left struggling unnecessarily because everything you thought you knew in the incumbent economy is over. It's changed or changing. It's all about the rising gig economy or the freelancer economy or the on-demand economy or the access economy, but whatever you want to call it, it's bigger than everything else you need to know about running your business today or even your employment. So it's time right now to turn off your phones, close the door, open up your Evernote so you can take some notes, and most importantly, pay attention to Diane and her studied research about you and your current life. And keep paying attention throughout, or you may miss the thing you personally most need to potentially change your life for the rest of your life. Think I'm kidding? Stay tuned because everybody needs a mentor. And through this interview, we are all being mentored. And by the way, you're also going to learn how you can now make your own life or business experiences that you've had to date far more valuable today than ever before. So now let's get started learning the rising gig economy and what it means for your small business. Diane Mulcahy, tell me a little bit about what is a gig and what is the gig economy that everybody keeps hearing about but probably doesn't really understand. So why don't you kind of help them get their bearings a little bit? First, why don't we start with what's a gig and then what is the gig economy?
Great place to start because I feel like so many people they hear the words gig economy and all they think about is Uber drivers. So I just want to dispel that myth right up front. The gig economy is much bigger and much broader. The way that I think about it is if you are not a full-time employee in a full-time job, then you're in the gig economy. So that means if you're a consultant, a contractor, an on-demand worker, a freelancer, or a part-timer, you're in the gig economy. And of course, a gig is any of the things that you work on in the gig economy. It can be a project, it can be a task, but what it isn't is a full-time job.
Great. That brings me to the other side of the coin that I'd like to talk about as well. That this is not only about getting a job, because we're talking about the gig economy, it is about using people who are working in the gig economy. And this is really changing the things and the way that small businesses are working and employing and marketing and everything else. Because there's, for small business owners, I'd like them also to know more about, sites like Upwork or Fiverr, where they can hire very experienced, talented, smart people who are very capable at things like digital marketing, graphic design, email marketing, a lot of different things that they probably would not have been able to afford agency pricing before. But now with the gig economy, they can hire very experienced from a very talented pool of freelancers to get a lot of things done that can really help their small business. Could you address that a little bit for us?
Well, I would just agree with that. There are a number of platforms emerging there whose purpose is to matchmake between businesses that need labor resources and people who want to offer services to businesses. And there are platforms for software coders, graphic designers, for, as you've mentioned, general freelance help. There's platforms for legal assistance. Anything that you want as a business is likely available to you through contracting with an independent worker in the gig economy, whether it's over a platform or somebody that you meet or know word of mouth wise.
Right. You can kind of cobble together a marketing campaign with different freelancers today rather than go with a more expensive ad agency.
Exactly. So it's a way to find the precise experience and skills and expertise that you need at a price that works for your business. And it's easy to find. I mean, what these platforms do is remove a lot of the friction between, companies that need help and workers that want to offer their services to companies.
Let's kind of talk a little bit about the enormity of this. How big is it? It seems like a tsunami that's coming. I just recently saw an article that 40% of companies are now hiring out of the gig economy. So this is really affecting virtually everybody. If you're a job seeker, it could affect you in that way. If you're a small business, it could affect you in terms of who you hire and how you hire. Tell us a little bit about how big this is and what you have statistically to kind of drive that point home.
From the statistics and data that I've seen in my research, there is a general consensus that about 20 to 30% of the workforce is engaged in working in the gig economy, either all of the time or some of the time. That's a pretty significant piece of the workforce for a trend that seems to have emerged within the past, let's say, 5 years. For the most part, the consensus is that this is only growing. And estimates range from, by 2020, anywhere from 40 to 50% of the workforce could be engaged in working in the gig economy. So, although the numbers aren't precise, I think the takeaway is that the gig economy is definitely here, it's here to stay, and it's growing.
I think with numbers that big, if you miss by a mile, it's still a pretty good indicator that this is a pretty big deal, right?
I'd agree with that.
Former Labor Secretary Robert Reich of Berkeley recently said that the gig economy represents the biggest change in the labor market in a century. Could you comment on that?
I do think the gig economy is a fundamental change in the way that we work. So I would agree with that. I mean, others have called it the fourth industrial revolution. There's a number of phrases that people have coined in order to try to capture the potential impact of this change on our economy. But the fact that people can now work when they want, where they want, how much they want, is really a fundamental change. If you think about the history of working life and you think about how tied workers used to be to the companies that they worked for, and what we've really seen in the gig economy is how thin and fragile that tie actually was, because it's now incredibly frayed and in some places completely broken. No longer are workers tied to one company, and no longer are companies tied to a fixed labor force. It's become much more dynamic, much more variable than ever.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the stories and the human interest stories or the success stories that you've encountered during your research.
There are so many stories, and they really are very different. I mean, I've heard stories of people who really chose the gig economy as the way they wanted to structure their work life, and went out and pursued independent work and developed the skills and the expertise to be able to successfully create a portfolio of work. And these people who have chosen that are incredibly satisfied and engaged in the work that they do. I've heard stories of people who had less choice in the matter. So maybe it was somebody who was laid off from a company and by necessity ended up turning a talent or an area of expertise or a skill into a small business, and they entered the gig economy that way. Or they ended up consulting with their prior employer, but not full time, and then ended up having to figure out a way to fill the rest of their time. And then I've heard, and talked to people who are essentially, quote unquote, retired. They're done with their full time working careers, and they've turned to the gig economy as a way to remain active and engaged in the working world, even though they are retired from their full-time positions. So the stories are many, the successes are varied, but what becomes clear is there are a lot of ways to take advantage of the opportunities in the gig economy, and particularly for those who have traditionally been on the margins of our labor force: stay-at-home mom, the students, the retirees that I've already talked about, the disabled, people who have always had trouble or lacked the desire to work in a traditional full-time job now have this option available that allows them to structure a work life that works for their life.
Diane, I've heard it referred to as the economy of choice. So let's say you're just hearing about the gig economy, and let's say you're looking for something to do. Well, if you look at it as choice, you could decide to take maybe a talent, something you love doing, travel, archery, cooking, embroidery, almost anything, and you could decide to start a solopreneur type business. That's one thing. But then to market that, you could then turn right around and also hire a inexpensive digital marketer in the gig economy on one of the gig marketplaces to help you to market your solopreneur startup. The other thing you talk about a little bit is how to finance your other gigs like travel or volunteer work or your passions. Let's address it from that standpoint.
Yeah, so what I have a chapter in my book about managing your time between gigs, right? So life is not all about work. And I think what one of the biggest opportunities in the gig economy is the chance for people to focus more on their personal lives and their personal goals. Because even if you're a busy independent contractor, there are always going to be times that you have in between projects or in between gigs. How do you pay attention to other aspects of your life? So I have a whole chapter that's dedicated to that. And of course, there are a number of people who, in the gig economy, want to specifically carve out time. It's not that they're waiting for time between gigs to just happen to them. They want to actively control their time and take more time off. And I have heard so many stories from independent workers who have done that. People who have said, I work like heck during 8 or 9 months out of the year so that I can have summers off with my kids. Or I'm really busy for 4 days out of the week, but I want to spend that last day of the week taking care of my elderly parent. People have all kinds of other obligations, responsibilities, priorities, values that are important to them. And the gig economy really gives workers the flexibility to make those decisions for themselves, to control their own time without having to go hat in hand to an employer and ask for that time.
Let's say someone is a pretty highly paid or has been a pretty highly paid consultant and they have a great expertise. You described this also as the access economy, and there's kind of two sides of that coin as well, from being able to access cars as you need them. While now people can access, like this consultant maybe just got laid off, they can also access him on an on-demand basis. So talk about the access side of this and how this really comes down to kind of personal gig economics.
Yeah, so I have a whole chapter on what I call the access economy, which really challenges our traditional notion of ownership. In the gig economy, when you work on a more flexible basis, and you have more variable income, it can be a lot harder to structure a financial life with a lot of fixed costs, right? Where you have to meet specific monthly payments all the time. And I think what I consider one of the biggest financial revolutions, talk about industrial revolutions, here's a personal financial revolution, is our increasing ability to avoid ownership and instead access the lifestyle that we want when we want it. So I like to use cars as an example because it's my own personal example. I live in a city and I haven't owned a car in a decade. And I can do that because instead of having to own a car and make that capital outlay and then have all those fixed costs that go along with a car, instead of that, I can just access my transportation when I need it. So I can rent a zip car, I can take an Uber, or rent a Hubway bicycle, or take the subway. I don't need to incur this fixed cost that I have to then generate enough revenue every month to meet the payment on. I can just have variable, flexible transportation costs. And that model is going to work much better in the gig economy than the older model that really relied on a steady fixed paycheck in order to execute it.
Now, here's an indicator that I think the gig economy is getting close to reaching a tipping point. When you take a company like Airbnb, and then an entrepreneur looks at that and goes, okay, well, that's a hot new business. And now we're in the gig economy, so I'm going to start another company called Peer Space, Peer Space, that's like Airbnb, but instead it's for little office spaces for solopreneurs to access office space so they can run a little business without having a big brick and mortar office space. So when you see things, where the gig economy is growing and then that spawns new gig economy opportunities, I think that's pretty interesting.
It's fabulous. And it really, I think, speaks to the opportunities in the gig economy that you see these businesses popping up to support both the gig economy trend and workers in the gig economy. And I love that idea of peer space, the idea that you can just access a small, flexible workspace if you're somebody who doesn't enjoy working at home or doesn't have a good setup. The last article that I wrote is called Will the Gig Economy Make the Office Obsolete? And I talk about this trend around co-working spaces and how they are increasingly replacing this idea of a traditional fixed office. I mean, really, it's very hard to make the case for why people who need to come into an office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. There's not one study that says that workers who do that are more productive, engaged, or satisfied than workers who don't. So I think that companies are really starting to realize that a flexible remote workforce is probably the wave of the future. And for people who don't like working at home, co-working spaces are a great alternative to having to go to the office every day.
Now, Diane, you recently taught an online course, I believe it was for Harvard Business Review, for MBA students. Talk a little bit about that.
That was an article that I wrote for Harvard Business Review, and it's called Why I Tell My MBA Students to Stop Looking for a Job and Join the Gig Economy. And that article was based on my 5 years of teaching an MBA class at Babson College called The Gig Economy. In it, I talk about why students who are graduating today need to be prepared for a workforce and a work economy that looks very different from the ones that their parents faced. So no longer can graduates come out and expect to get a job and work for one or two or three companies for the rest of their working lives. Most of us will change jobs a dozen times over the course of our working lives. And for many of us, we won't work in traditional full-time jobs. We'll be working independently for multiple clients and on multiple projects. So MBA programs really haven't caught up to that reality, and they aren't doing a good job preparing students for this new way of working. And that was really the crux of the article, is our educational institutions need to do a much better job of preparing students for today's workplace, not the one from a generation ago.
Well, when you told me that in our last interview, I immediately contacted our local community college and they invited me to go in and teach a course about the gig economy to business students. We did that and it went very, very well. It was very well received. What I'd like to ask you, in light of this discussion and everything that we've kind of talked about on both sides of the coin here, do you believe that this could become, and likely will, become the golden age of small businesses or entrepreneurs? Because if you are a gig, you're a freelancer, you are by definition a small business, and you may well be working with small businesses. Isn't that true?
That is true. And I think beyond just the individual and I agree with your premise that the more people who work independently, the more we're going to see like this idea of small businesses and people starting their own solopreneurship businesses. But I think beyond that, if you look at Silicon Valley, where our innovation in business takes place, and you look at the most highly valued and high growth companies and look at their business models, what we're not seeing is companies like GE that have 300,000 employees. We're not seeing any companies like that emerge in our innovation economy. Instead, what we're seeing is companies that have business models that require very low numbers of employees. So think about Twitter, Facebook, Dropbox, Twilio, all of these companies that are very highly valued in our economy. Most of them have fewer than 10,000 employees, some of them fewer than 5,000. And these are companies with global reach that have valuations that compare to our largest, oldest traditional companies. And I think that's the business model of the future. Very lean business models that require a relatively small number of employees. And I don't know that we're ever going to get back to a time where we see companies emerge that need hundreds of thousands of employees. I think that day may be over.
Well, I recently spoke at a jobs ministry in Danville, California, about the gig economy. I was invited back. At the second session, one of the speakers talked about confidence. And I realized there's a big fear factor. Of course, if you're out of work, of course your confidence may be shaken. But I realized people have a great fear of taking action. And I realized that I think one of the ways I can best help a lot of people today, helping people to understand where they are, build their confidence, capture their confidence in their gig marketplace posting, tell their story in a confident way. I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown. So obviously people should go out and read the book The Gig Economy by Diane Mulcahy. That's a good way to kind of get your feet grounded and get your understanding of where you are right away. But what other ways and what other things can you say to people that feel like that they've lost their way, or they're just not confident enough to take steps? Because you can't take action if you don't have confidence.
That's such a great point. And I have a whole chapter in my book on fear and risk. And I have a number of exercises that I think are really helpful, that have helped my students tremendously, that I walk the reader through to help them deal with the fear of making this change in the way that they work and moving into the gig economy. And I do think the fear is real. The other thing I can say, there are two other pieces of advice that I think are really helpful for people who think that they might want to work independently, but are feeling afraid or are feeling a lack of confidence. One is, if you're in a full-time job, now is the time to prepare. And I really encourage everybody who's in a full-time job to develop an exit strategy for that job. And what I mean by that is a plan to leave. So if the exercise that I use in my class is, I ask the students to imagine that in 6 months they knew they were going to be laid off from their current position. What would they do? What would they do professionally, personally, financially? Make a list of all those details, networking events, getting your finances in order, getting some key projects done, maybe taking a class. And I recommend making that list in as much detail as you can, and then starting to execute it. I think there's a tremendous amount of power and control that people can derive from feeling like they are in control of their lives, and having a plan and a strategy can help make you feel that way. The second piece of advice I suggest is to just always have a side gig going on. Instead of worrying about, oh my gosh, what happens if I decide to go out on my own and hang up my own shingle and I don't make enough money or I don't have enough customers or whatever your fear is. Instead of worrying while you're in a full-time job, start with a side gig. It's a very low cost and low risk way to experiment with things that you might be interested in doing. So it allows you to test the market. What's the demand for your service or your product or your expertise? How much are people willing to pay for it? And by doing that testing, and you can do a number of different tests, a number of different experiments until you find the thing that seems to work the best for you. I think that can help people gain confidence to then launch out on their own.
Before I ask you the final question, let me just ask this quick question that came up. The role of consultants and infopreneurs. I think there's also a great opportunity right now for people who can take things they've learned and know, capture them on a online course and get into the gig economy by selling what they know as an information product. Any thoughts on that?
Well, expertise is something that people bring to the table, and whether it's selling it as a course or selling your expertise to companies or selling your expertise to individuals, those are all things worth considering. How can you best leverage that expertise into either a side gig or into a full-time gig is a great exercise.
And finally, I believe that a lot of this comes down to courage, confidence, and creativity. Tell us all about that story of one of your students who decided he wanted to travel Europe and he rented places and then sub-rented them in the gig economy. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Oh, so one of my students really took the class to heart, and he was graduating and decided to not to go through on-campus recruiting and look for a job. And instead, he has rented a number of apartments in an urban area, and he hired a project manager to look after them and be on site in person to help manage the properties. And from the proceeds of that business, he has taken off. He has decided to accomplish one of his long-held personal goals that he's very passionate about and travel around the world. And he emailed me about 6 months after graduation and said, here are all the countries I've been to, and I'm traveling around, and I'm, running this business, and I couldn't be happier, and thank you. And it was really an amazing story of how the gig economy can allow you to have both a successful professional life and accomplish your personal goals.
And how does someone who is interested in having you speak at an event or get a hold of you, how can they best get a hold of you?
The easiest way is through my website, which is DianeMulcahy.com.
Simple enough. Well, Diane Mulcahy, thanks for joining us and telling us all about your experience with the gig economy.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Guys, the really good news is that the information that you just received is transformational. It's bigger than me, and Diane Mulcahy knows it's bigger than her too. She's delivering the word, kind of like Paul Revere, to alert you that a revolution is at hand. It's a small business revolution. And so the sooner that you confront that fact, ideally today, the easier that making that shift in thinking will be for you. We're here to help you with our Yes Academy of client acquisition strategies for the gig economy. We will help you create and share your core message as your signature story. I will interview you to design it, create it, and share it. I'm also now ready, willing, and able to help you to overcome your fears. How? By gaining message clarity to instantly regain your exciting vision and hope for a brighter future. Through our compact entrepreneur interview process, I will then create with you an audiobook or ebook, plus also create a custom anthology story landing page to help make more sales or capture email addresses. And because of my national radio feature stories, your anthology story landing page comes complete with built-in media status citations of NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, and more, which you aren't even paying for because we promote our Press Talk anthology books on our national radio shows. Media citations like these from NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and more, and especially with a number of them, give your signature story huge guaranteed advantages. Number one, of course, you get instant trusted authority status with your customers. And two, and this is a little media insider hack to tell you, talk show hosts and producers, which I've been with for years, and journalists run in packs. We all cover stories and write about stories that others are covering. So you'll get better attention when other journalists and producers see those media logos with your signature story, because they then feel confident that you're a safe topic to cover. They're not going to get fired. So if you'll contact me and just say, Mike, I am ready to learn more about saving up to 90% off marketing agency pricing. No worries. Even if that's all you want to know, I will schedule a no cost, no obligation media strategy call with you and also send you my tutorial. Sell your course before you create it. More on that at the end. But you can sign up for our daily or weekly growth hack tips and join our mission to help grow USA one small business at a time. Just visit www.helpinggrowusa.com or visit presstalkbooks.com and grab a no cost, no obligation media strategy session with me. Put that on my calendar so I can answer your questions about how to shorten your runway from vision to reality, so you can know current vital resources and learn how they will lower your costs and save you time. You'll gain clarity about your one-page signature story. You'll know your ideal customer. You'll know how to share your signature business story with them cost effectively. You'll know how to sell them even before you meet them in 4 weeks or less. That's right, 4 weeks or less, about 30 days, you'll be rocking and rolling. Right now, during the launch of our Help Grow USA across the country, for the first 10 people, I will do all of the things that I described here for you for under $1,000, and I'll even give you payment options. You can use this to promote your coaching practice, your speaking practice, your book, anything that you want to promote, your small business, your consulting business, your life coaching business, your business coaching business, your financial planning business, your insurance business, your ad agency, your doctor's office, or whatever it is that you need to promote. I created the Yes Academy and Side Gig School with my Dream Team mentors to help you get to yes with your customers to see your own dreams fulfilled. We also have media group buying options that you have to learn more about. These work with kind of like Groupon a little bit with like-minded entrepreneurs. So ask me about our upcoming USA Today 4-color spread, all bought together. When I saw the writing on the wall and I saw that the small business market was broken, I transitioned from ad agency owner to freelance gig marketer in the on-demand gig economy. Everybody then was attracted to me, just as people are always attracted to a good idea. I was able to create Dream Team Mentoring, the Yes Academy for client acquisition strategies. In other words, how to get new clients. Whether you are experienced or a newbie, if you don't know what a media sales funnel is, or you just want help getting new clients, no problem there either. Our team will help you. We just need to know what your signature story is. And if you don't know that, we'll help you design it around your ideal business and life. Second, we'll help you create it with our interview process mentoring. Third, we'll help you share it with our media marketing mentoring. And get this, we'll teach you new strategies you can now afford with up to 90% off agency pricing. The incumbent economy is over. The on-demand gig economy is now here. And we can even offer discounts on our do-it-for-you program systems in case you're too busy to do it yourself or if you're on a tight budget. And you can contact us about our free open source video coaching for do-it-yourselfers. And because we are inclusive and not exclusive, we also offer scholarships to get in where you fit in. You really can't lose unless you don't try. So take one action right now. Join us on helpinggrowusa.com. Learn how to transition smoothly with the gig economy. Learn about affordable authority marketing. Learn about Meetup Mastery marketing. Most importantly, learn the new discounts for small business marketing that your competitors are already using, and now you can start saving time and money too. And don't forget, you can even apply for a scholarship. All those benefits come down to one thing. Join us right now on helpinggrowusa.com or presstalkbooks.com. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to talking soon. I'm Mike Hayes.